Welcome back, everybody. It is Business Monday on GoLocal Live. Welcome to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm Josh Fenton with cha-ching, the money man, Gary Sasse. Whew. It is a wild and woolly period of time. Chaos everywhere.
Tell me about this chaos.
Well, we got chaos in the governor's race. We got Joe Trillo throwing bombs at everyone. We've got Matt Brown out there somewhere. Kate Nagel's got a story, I think. Is it up? We don't know. But Kate Nagel's got a story that Lincoln Chafee is very unlikely to run for governor this cycle.
I heard that.
So that's some big news in the governor's race. The race seems to be amongst the candidates, not amongst the public, but amongst the candidates already running. They're all stressed out. They're all swiping and unhappy and all those kind of things. You've been involved in this for a long time, back when didn't even have credit cards and you just had cash piled up in the basement. What's going on here? Is this just...
It's called walking around money. Okay.
Is this just the reality of the chaos of politics today, coupled with a governor who's at 40% approval rating?
I think so. I think certainly a majority of the people do not believe the state is going in the right direction. The governor doesn't appear to be, relating to the average working people. She's not a particularly popular governor. Probably the most vulnerable Democratic incumbent governor in the United States. So that would, bring out candidates. The two candidates in the Republican primary shouldn't be unexpected. Mayor of Cranston, Alan Fung, ran before. It was clear he was interested. Pat Morgan has paid her dues, working her way up to minority leader. So that's pretty typical, particularly when there's a vulnerable person of the other party sitting in the governor's chair. Then when you get beyond that, it becomes a little weird. I think, Trillo prides himself on being Rhode Island's Donald Trump. He sent out some comments about the Starbucks situation.
Yes, he chided the CEO of Starbucks. We had a good juxtaposition of Ray Rickman saying, this is pretty much racism. I mean, two guys sitting there waiting for a friend and you get arrested. Generally doesn't happen as a white customer who has been waiting at Starbucks many a time. I have yet to be arrested. And then Joe Trillo saying that the CEO of Starbucks collapsed under the pressure of...
The CEO of Starbucks, Joe's right about one thing. The CEO of Starbucks is a left-winger. There's no question about that. But the fact that Joe would put that into a campaign...
Oh yeah, no, he was
whatsoever.
pouring gasoline on the fire.
And so that's the Trump effect. And I think that's really a foolish position to be in because people don't ordinarily, though there are exceptions, and if you look to Washington, you might find one, don't vote for demagogues.
Yeah.
Bigotry, there are dog whistles and there's outright bigotry.
Yeah.
And, so I think that candidacy reflects the confusion nationally. I don't know who is paying attention right now. It's nice.
I don't think the public's paying much attention. Although today's story about Matt Brown did very well, far beyond the insider readership.
I saw that story. Is that the story that went back and looked at the history?
Yeah. Looked at his donor base over the years. He's saying he's going to run as sort of a Bernie Sanders left of the governor as an independent. And you go back and look, and God bless him, in the early 2000s, he was a voracious fundraiser and was strongly supported by the most affluent, powerful families in Rhode Island.
Who were part of the insiders. And
yeah, that's right. I mean, it's hard to say I'm going to run from the outside and change everything, but the Gilbanes and the Choquettes and the Sharps and the Goddards and the Chases, he had them all.
And those insiders reflect what happens in elections in the state, and they elect some very liberal and very progressive people. So I don't know if he's history or there's something new. It's hard to determine at this point.
So Will Morgan was on. He literally is one of the preeminent architectural critic writers in America, and he was talking about how ugly the Fane Tower is, and Wexford's bland, and this building's this, and that building's there, and the Brown building's there. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of construction going on. Does the governor get any points for that there's some real velocity in at least in the construction industry.
Well, the governors and the building trades are joined at the hip.
They are very close. She
Yeah.
was just spoke down at their national convention last week.
Well, it depends. If the public has a perception that these buildings are going to provide employment beyond a temporary construction employment, and there'll be synergies and there'll be clusters developed and
Right.
there's economic opportunity, you certainly get credit. But I was in a meeting close to the State House and I saw those big green buildings. So we've given tax credits to build apartment houses across from the train station.
Right.
I don't think anybody gets too excited about that. That's not real economic
No,
development.
and those people are probably next to the train station because they're going to take the train to Boston every day.
Yeah, and then the question on the Wexford project is interesting. If it turns out to be the Wexford project that existed in North Carolina or in Maryland, that's one thing. But if it's the Wexford project that has empty laboratories and a hotel, and it houses a relocated Brown office, that's quite a different thing. So clearly, I think what you can say is the governor should get some credit. There is activity, but that's not resonating with people because I don't think people see directly how that's going to improve them or their family situations.
The budget situation seems to be still a little troublesome. We talked about it in detail last week. Revenue numbers continue to see upswing across almost all the categories, which is the good sign. Spending and fixing some problems also seems to be so. But both sides seem to be.
The state has a structural deficit, and we spoke before about incremental budgeting and pulling rabbits out of the hat. Well, if state revenues run ahead by 2.5% this year, that's another 50 to 60 million. So that compounds next year. So that probably gets you enough money to wiggle your way
Out of this year.
But then whoever the next governor is going to find themselves with a hell of a fiscal mess in January.
When Bruce Sundlun came in, it was credit union, it was a number of structural issues, including a massive budget shortfall of $300 or $400 million. I think that first year, and the budget was about half the size that it is now. I want to say it was $5 billion, and we had a $400 million deficit. And what he did with the departments was he said, give me 3 or 4 different budget levels, a 10% cut, a 15% cut, and a 20% cut, and be ready. Don't shorten the process in doing the analysis, because any one of those scenarios could be implemented. And they did.
I was Bruce's fiscal advisor, as you know, for the first 6 months of that administration. Well, the difference is we had a governor then who understood business and was serious about bringing the budget back into balance. And keep in mind, too, we had to keep the temporary sales tax increase just to pay off, DEPCO.
And real furloughs.
Yeah.
Every 10th day was a furlough.
And we negotiated tough with the unions, reduced the size of the workforce. There was a lot done to improve the structure of the financial structure, but you have to have a will to do it. And what's missing right now is I don't see the political will to bring spending under control. As a matter of fact, you look at the current budget and you have $25+ million worth of scoops. You have money being taken away from transportation projects that was for maintenance and going back into the general fund. You got money in the budget for gambling, which the Supreme Court hasn't decided. I know that
is the ultimate irony is that we're betting on the Supreme Court coming out with a decision?
We're betting on a Trump appointee, Mr. Gorsuch, or Justice Gorsuch. But those things.
By the way, who just disappointed the right on a recent decision last week?
Well, he actually read the law. Good for him. So you have, I'm just giving you examples, and on top of that, today the head of the state Medicaid agency came out and said we should restore an ill-founded, ill-timed, ill-begotten, cut in Medicaid spending, another $16 million. We're talking about, and so there seems to be a disconnect between dealing with the problem and trying to get through this election year. This is the most election year budget I've seen in some time. There's a lot of gimmicks in that budget. I think they'll muddle through. We always do. Revenues are running better. But you can wake up on January 2nd with a headache.
Could the next governor, everybody always talks about zero-based budgeting. Could a governor actually, listen, there's certain things that are locked in by federal requirements, but on everything else, could we ever actually could a new governor or this governor coming back from re-election say, you know what, the first 60 days, we're going to really look at this budget and we're going to come back with something completely different, because we can't do the things, we can't do the new initiatives without actually making some reforms to our spending structure?
Well, to a limited degree, not completely, and let me tell you what I mean by that. Medicaid.
Yeah.
300,000 Rhode Islanders, federal mandates, 34% or over 30% of the state budget. You can't touch that.
Yeah.
Education aid, another $1 billion. No governor would suggest that we start pulling back on education aid. So once you've taken education aid and Medicaid spending, and we haven't touched anything else, just those
Right.
two items, that's 2/3 of the budget. So are you talking about zero spending on base spending on a third of the budget? That's not going to solve the problem, and that's the same problem the federal government has, because when you look at the amount of the federal budget that's discretionary versus non-discretionary, you can't get there just by cutting discretionary
So
spending.
you're going with the traffic camera strategy across Rhode Island.
No.
The only way we're going to...
I think we got to stop gimmicks, with it, and really, sit down. And we're increasing the payroll this year.
Yeah.
There's no excuse to increase the payroll this year.
Yeah, last time, what was interesting in February to March numbers on the job numbers, forget which numbers we're using, construction was down February to March, manufacturing was down February to March, and government services was up.
Yeah, and so, what that says, basically is that the investments that we're making in the private sector, at least to this point, peaked, and we don't see where they go. They're plateaued. We'll see where it goes from this point on. But you got to get serious about the budget. You got to set priorities, and there are things that government is doing that maybe we shouldn't be doing. But then you look at the UHIP problem, which is hundreds of thousands of dollars. You look at the
Hundreds of millions of dollars. Yeah.
I
know it's all the same to you, Mr. Moneyman.
Just
hundreds of thousands, hundreds of millions.
Just zeros.
Just zeros.
But then you look at the deplorable conditions in some of the group homes where we take care of kids.
Absolutely.
And as a taxpayer, you sit back and you say, what the heck is going on? We can't take care of kids properly that are in state wards. We can't get up a computer system to hand out checks, which is basically what it does. It's people eligible for certain kinds of benefits. We can't have a serious conversation about really reforming Medicaid by delivering services more efficiently. And so I think there's a question of setting priorities. I think it's a question of looking at the way we deliver certain services and making changes.
Tomorrow night, the City of Providence budget address goes forward. We're in a period of time in the City of Providence where real estate values, especially on the east side, are growing dramatically, which is masking a lot of the structural issues that are going to come home to roost the next time there's a recession. What should this mayor be doing?
What should this mayor be doing?
Yeah.
Well, that's a good question. I think in certain areas he has to invest and demand more performance and accountability from schools, because unless we turn around our schools, the excitement you look at this windows downtown is not going to change very much.
Right.
They say if you're not the lead dog, the scenery doesn't change. I think we have some good people in the school department now. I think this current superintendent has potential to be an effective leader.
He's your guy, right? You like him?
I don't know if he's my guy, but I think he's trying to do a good job, yeah.
Yep.
So I think he has to be focused on education, but focused on performance and accountability. The rest of it is very difficult because you're hemmed in by these contracts. If you look at Providence's budget, again, schools, public safety, police and fire, very little else that we spend money on. And you have these contracts, you have concerns about the level, particularly in the police department, of adequate manning on the streets.
Providence is one of the only cities in the country in which has higher staffing for the fire department than does the police department. You've got staffing of about 400 in the police department. It should be just fully funded and fully staffed at about 500. It seems to be an upside down priority. That's nothing new. That's been going on for a couple
that
decades.
raises an important question. You said what the state could do. Labor laws, particularly as it affects firefighters, the rules of the game are set in the legislature.
Yeah.
And until the legislature, modernizes labor laws that affects negotiating at the municipal level, you've kind of tied the hands of mayors behind their back. And then, you know this as well as anybody, the elephant in the room are these pensions. And to think you can sell an asset and then fund down your pension liability without making the other reforms is,
No, I know.
the prophecy continues.
Listen, I don't think it's the worst idea in the world to monetize in some structure the Providence Water Supply Board. I mean, it's a massive asset that creates no value for the taxpayer or the city. I don't know what the best construct is yet. I think that's going to get poked at.
That's another issue. Yeah.
Well, you value it based on what will somebody pay for it. But the question is, if it's a one-time offering and you pick up $150, $200 million and you use it to offset some of the ongoing pension liabilities or healthcare liabilities, it's a drop in the budget. You've got to combine $2 billion right about between long-term health coverage and pension. So $200 million doesn't even get you in the game.
You have to face the reality that if you could monetize, part of your unfunded liability, at the same time you need to deal with benefit levels.
Yeah.
And to think that we can continue as new people are hired. I understand it's a contract. I don't want to take
Yep.
benefits away from anybody that has this contracted obligation. But it may be time for a Class A and a Class B and a Class C set of benefits. You need to think outside the box as far as those concerned. And it is a revenue issue, but it's not just a revenue issue. It's a policy issue on what future costs are going to be and how we're going to control those costs.
Well, and I think some other mayors have wasted good crises. There's been some significant financial issues in the city, which were the opportunities to make wholesale changes. I honestly think public unions were ready for it. They understood it was coming. And it seems like everybody who becomes mayor then thinks they're running for something else, and they often do. Paolino, Cicilline, Taveras want to go run for some other office, and thus the pressure to make the tough changes is minimized because they don't want to lose union support to go and run for another office.
No, that's understandable. It'd be anytime you elect your own boss, your leverage is
Yeah.
affected by that. But
That's why we need a powerful, you can move up from East Greenwich, powerful, independent guy like you to run the city of Providence.
No, you need a city that's responsive to the concerns of the citizens, but being responsive also means that you have to be responsible.
Right.
And the problem is everyone recognizes the problems. We could stand here for the next 5 hours and discuss what the
We're
problem.
sitting.
Yeah. Well, sometimes you feel we could agree on what the problems are. They've been described for a long time, but at some point somebody's going to have to take over and do something about it. Now, it's a political system, so people have to be responsive. But you have to be responsive in a way that begins to solve the problems. And to think you can solve it just by monetizing it, you can get some relief from monetizing it, but at the end of our grandchildren have a problem as well.
Last question before you go. This governor's race, is this going to be, we talked last time a little bit, is it a referendum about Gene Orr? Is it a referendum about the future of Rhode Island's finances? Is that really what it comes down, where economic growth is going to come?
That's a very good question, because right now I'm not sure what it's a referendum on. We have a sitting governor that talks about economic development, and no one believes that it's really happening.
I think in fairness to her, she thinks about it, she spends a lot of time on it, she works at it, whether or not it's driving the change we want to see.
Well, you can look at the growth numbers nationally and look at the growth numbers in Rhode Island, and with all the attention we're paying for it, you can come to your own conclusions by looking at those numbers. But unfortunately, the politics at this point is very confused. I'd like to see a good race. I'd like to see whoever the eventual Republican candidate is, put out their proposal, with all the T's crossed and the I's dotted on how they think they can move this economy forward, and use that as a benchmark or measuring stick against what the governor has done, because she has to defend her record. Now, that would be a positive, regardless of the outcome. that would be a positive election and a positive discussion. I don't see it happening right now. And the reason I don't see it happening is it's a very confusing race. You get a Republican, a Democrat, a Trillocrat, you know, and what you end up doing is playing a game of who can siphon off the most votes from whom, and that doesn't have room for serious discussion of the issues.
Yeah, we've got 10 candidates all.
Oh, I think it's. I think with Trillo in the race, I think it puts the Republican candidate, whoever that is, at a serious disadvantage.
Matt Brown could be the offsetting factor, potentially.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with that.
Listen, I want to thank the money man Chit-Ching for being on. Always insightful. We've still got to recruit him to move up to Providence, make that run in 2018 for the mayor of Providence.
If you give me a penthouse in
the Superman building,
that'd be okay. Yeah.
We're going to be right back in 1 second with Mr. Innovation, Saul Kaplan. We're going to talk Amazon HQ2. Be right back.